Awesome. And thank you so much, Eric. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm so excited that you all are here and that for everyone who's joining us online. My name is John Tauzel. I'm the Senior Director for Global Agriculture Methane here at EDF. And again, I'm so excited to bring forward the conversations that we are today with farmers, with companies who are engaged in this space, and with our partners to talk about how we can really help drive change and build more climate resilient livestock systems globally. So I'll go ahead and get started here with let me get the slides warmed up. Great. So just as by way of setting the scene a little bit, here at the Environmental Defense Fund, we are focused on building a vital Earth for everyone. And I think one of the key things that we think about when we think about a vital Earth is making sure that we also ensure vital nutrition for everyone globally, and also supporting the vital need for economic security that people have around the world. So that kind of, when we think about those conflicts, and then we think about kind of those issues, and we think about climate change, we realize that climate change is the largest threat to life on Earth. We know that more intense weather events are going to create hotter and drier temperatures. That's going to create the resulting collapse in ecosystems and increased risk to communities. In fact, 4 in 10 people live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to climate change. And I think one of the major issues that you think about with an agriculture perspective is that oftentimes farmers are the ones who feel the effects of climate change. They're on the front lines of dealing with that climate change. So we all know this. Climate change is caused by an increased concentration in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And I think very specifically, methane is one of the gases we are most concerned about here at EDF, because it actually has a much more higher potency than carbon dioxide in the first 20 years after it's emitted. In fact, it's over 80 times more potent than CO2 in the first 2 decades after its emission. Methane is causing 25% of the global warming we're experiencing today. And livestock are actually one of the largest sources of human-related methane emissions. And so we're in this kind of construct of how do we help farmers, how do we help the agricultural systems become more climate resilient, and in doing so, both protect themselves against climate change while also reducing the impacts that climate change have. So our quick agenda for today, so excited that we have so many speakers. I'm going to ask Britt Grossman in a minute to come up and talk a little bit about how we got here. What EDF's broad view on agriculture methane. We're going to hear about a manure systems overview. We've got some farmer conversations spread throughout the day. We're going to have some kind of a conversation about corporate action, and then a little bit of smallholder solutions as well. So as I'm super excited, thank you for everybody again for being here. I'll just deep dive a little bit about why methane matters before we hear from Britt. So I think one of the important things that we know is that because methane is so potent, if we can reduce methane today by making immediate and robust reductions in methane, we can actually bend the curve down so we don't exceed that 2 degrees Celsius in warming. So what that means is it's not just about net zero, it's about how we get to net zero. So by reducing methane now, we can actually make faster reductions towards our net zero commitments, and also stave off the worst effects of climate change. So where does methane come from? As I said before, agriculture is the largest source. I know for those in the room, this graph is a little bit hard to read. On the right, on your left-hand side is the human-related methane emissions from globally, and on the right-hand side here in the US. And I think what's important is that if you focus on these very big boxes, those are livestock-related emissions. And specifically, enteric emissions are one of the larger sources of those emissions. So just deep dive. So here are quick thoughts that we think about it before we move forward. I'm going to go through a little bit. I'm happy to talk more about methane, but we've got great speakers coming up. It is important, again, to realize that methane is one metric. It's not the only metric. And what you're going to hear, I think, the theme today across the conversations is the complexity that we're dealing with agricultural systems. And so, yes, we're focused on reducing methane, but we also need to recognize that we have to think about all of the various complex aspects that go into agricultural systems as well. Again, it's not just about getting to net zero, it's about how we get to net zero, and those rapid reductions in methane can stave off the worst effects of climate change. And I think it's also important, we think about net zero, and I think oftentimes people don't necessarily think about methane, or they think about carbon dioxide or a net zero commitment, and they think we need to get to zero on methane as well. And that's not the case. Methane emissions from livestock, they don't need to get to zero, but if we make rapid reductions, significant reductions, we can stave off the worst effects of climate change. So I'll just high level for those of you, I know many of you know about ag methane, but just high level on this. If we think about the solution sets, we think about production systems, two different types of production systems. One is what we call extensive dairy production systems or extensive livestock systems. And there the focus is really about optimizing productivity. And then we think about our more intensive dairy production systems, and there the focus is more on mitigating enteric and manure emissions. And I think regardless of the systems that you're thinking about, the key aspect to finding solutions and to delivering solutions is to make sure that we're working within these areas that the overlap of what farmers care about and getting farmers to adopt it. Because ultimately, if farmers are not able to adopt the practices, those practices are not effective. Farmers are the key to driving these solutions. And so whenever we build solutions, we need to think about how they're going to be implemented in the farm setting. So I'll just high level, what does optimizing productivity mean? So this is a theory for those of you new to the space. By improving the productivity of each animal, we can reduce the amount of methane generated per unit of milk or meat produced. So what this does in the total aggregate, is that we can then reduce the total amount of methane generated by livestock systems compared to business as usual. And then a key component of this, how do we optimize, is making sure that animals are fed well and that they're healthy. Kind of the first step that we think about when we're finding solutions. And I think it's also important to realize that particularly in the Global South context, so much of this is social, there are so many social dynamics here. In the Global South context, optimizing means that we account for other important aspects that livestock provide to families. So, for example, in many communities or in many cultures, livestock are the key financial asset that a family may own. And so recognizing that important role that these animals play as well is important when we think about solution sets. And so that's on the optimizing. I'm going to talk a little bit about enteric, which is the other big solution set that we think about, enteric fermentation. And then Finn's going to talk a little bit later about manure, which is kind of the third rung of the stool, the leg of the stool. So let's just take a step back. And I grew up around cows. I'm continually fascinated by cows. They are really and truly this magnificent modern marvel of science, I guess evolutionary modern. Right? They turn this fibrous material that no one can consume, they turn byproducts that no one can consume into this really nutrient-dense product that we can all consume. That's amazing. And this conversion happens, though, through this fermentation process, right? This cow's stomach is a big fermentation process. And these certain rumen bugs, for those of you not less side, we'll call them rumen bugs, some of them actually generate methane, and that's the cow burps those out, and that's what causes enteric fermentation. And again, it's the burps, not the other end. So, and so the goal here when we talk about enteric fermentation is finding ways to reduce methane production from ruminant digestion. So this is not easy. So if you think about the cow's stomach and her rumen, that fermentation process, she has an ecosystem living inside of her, the really complex process, and then she's part of this much broader, really complex system as well. And so finding enteric solutions is not an easy task. And so here are some of the questions that EDF we're thinking about as we bring forward enteric solutions. I think the questions we're asking, are solutions safe? Are they effective? And are they realistic? So our products that we're using to reduce enteric emissions, are they safe? First and foremost, are they safe for the animals that we're using them on? Are they safe for the humans who are going to consume the milk and the meat that are produced that have been treated with these products? We're ultimately here to reduce methane emissions. Are those products effective? And very high level, what does effectiveness actually mean, right? So how do we make sure that we're measuring cows? So we can put a mask on every cow, right? They also have to eat. They don't necessarily like them. So, right, they're like some humans, right? So it's a little bit of a process to even detect that. Excuse me. What time scale do we use? So we have to realize that we could treat something today, but again, life finds a way. If I lived on a farm, life finds a way. Those methane generating bugs will find a way in the rumen. And so we need to make sure that we're doing long-term tests and long-term trials to make sure there are no long-term effects and that we understand those long-term effects. Are these solutions effective across a variety of farming systems? I often say if you visit 5 different farmers, and today we're going to hear from 3 great farmers, each of them that's 3 different systems, and each of them do something differently. So we have to recognize that farming systems are really complex. They're all a variety of different ways that they can be interacted, and we need solutions that fit across all of those various farming systems. And are they effective over the long term? And then that's great. So we have a safe, effective product that we've developed. Do they actually fit into farming operations? Do they make sense for the farmer to adopt? Are they within the operations? Do they make sense? And then also financially, what's the use case here? And again, these are all this requires a complex research agenda. So quick current state of the solutions, and I'll give a shout out to my PlusBiz colleagues who have pulled together a very great high-level document for corporates, the QR codes there. And again, this is based off work that the GRA, the Global Research Alliance, kind of focused on to give a perspective of where we are with our existing solutions. I think today we're going to hear from a farmer who's actually used 3-NOP. So the only one that's been approved globally at this point in time in certain jurisdictions is 3-NOP. Others Research, again, as we talked about, the research is moving forward on some of the other products. So I'm going to stop there because I know we've got to keep moving. I'll pause for a quick question. Quick questions? Okay.